Yo guys, what's going on? I'm Tim Kelly along with Justin Godsey. This is the 30 Clubs, 30 Previews MLB special brought to you by the fine folks at The Real Sports Talk and the Nation Sports Blog. And Justin and I, we've been getting a lot of requests, do this team, do that team. There's a playlist on my channel at youtube.com/Mr. Kelsar. It says 2013 MLB Preview. If you click there, you'll see all the teams we've done so far. It's just under 15. And if you don't see your favorite team there, I know we've had some requests for other teams. We're doing every team, so just hang in there with us, and you will get an in-depth preview of your team. Today, the team that we are previewing, Justin, is the New York Mets. They had a hot start to the season last year. Terry Collins had this team overachieving. And then really, I think when it came down to it, the Mets were overachieving early on in the season, and they came back down to reality towards the end of the season. R.A. Dickey won the Cy Young. That was the biggest part of their season last year. He's now in Toronto. They moved him away because they could not agree on a long-term contract. Ultimately, the Mets finished 24 games out of the Washington Nationals for first place at 74 and 88. So I think looking at the talent on that roster, a 74 and 88 season was not horrendous. But it's certainly still, no matter how much talent you have, you don't like to have an under 500 record. You like to be competing. And the New York Mets, for a little time early on in the season, were competing. This year, Justin, the Mets have a big year. They're hosting the All-Star Game. They've locked up David Wright long-term. And in the offseason, they did trade away R.A. Dickey, but they've made some moves that have helped this team prep for the future.
You know, when you're looking into their future, I mean, you can't really say into the future right now, but you know what, it's good for the present and what they got this offseason. You know, they were able to go out there, they were able to get Brendan Lyon, they were able to acquire, not really acquire, they were able to grab on to Sean Markham on a deal. I think it was a 2-year deal on Sean Markham, which one move really surprised me was that move right there, because so many teams were looking at him, and the Mets came as a good student. I also looked at it, so you know it's going to be good depth in their pitcher rotation for them. Some minor league moves that they got is Marlon Byrd, who is another really surprising move, who's been really great throughout spring training. Omar Quintanilla, who had a really decent year with the Baltimore Orioles last year. He's going to be reuniting back in New York with his old team. Now he's with the Mets this year. Let's just hope that he can, you know, have the type of defensive type of season, because, you know, he's not that big of a power hitter. He's more of that average and great defensive type of guy, so it's good to have him back. Some pitching that they were able to grab onto Aaron Laffey and LaTroy Hawkins. So you know what? I don't really think that these are the guys who are past the prime of their careers, and now it's just, you know, with that veteran leadership is pretty much what they're going to be bringing to this team. And there's also another guy that I left out here is Colin Calgo, another guy who's been performing really well also during spring training. So you guys want to look out for there, as this Mets outfield really needs depth. And, you know, Colin Calgo could be a guy that could potentially be on this roster.
And in the R.A. Dickey trade, they were able to bring back 3 players, actually a bigger package, but the 3 main players were John Buck, Noah Syndergaard, and Travis Denard. Travis Denard and Noah Syndergaard I'll get to in a second, because they're not going to begin the year at the MLB level. At best, you'll see them later on in the season in Travis Denard's case. But in John Buck's case, he's going to begin the year as a starting catcher. We're going to preview that more as we go through position by position, but he will be their starting catcher coming over from Toronto. Noah Syndergaard has a stuff to be, I think, a number 2 starter for this team in the future. And then long-term, Travis Denard is the guy for this team at catcher. I believe that they won that trade ultimately with the Toronto Blue Jays. Because while the Blue Jays got a very good pitcher in R.A. Dickey, won the Cy Young, I'm not sure if he's going to touch or do quite what he did last year. And you're getting a 10-year catcher, I really believe, in Travis Denard, a franchise-type catcher, and those are hard to come by. The Mets weren't going to win with R.A. Dickey, so they made the move that helped them in their future. They also looked at Brian Wilson, who's still available, and they did look at Michael Bourne, who ultimately signed with the Cleveland Indians. So they were out there in the offseason. Unfortunately, it didn't materialize into a ton. So let's begin at catcher with John Buck. John Buck last year for the Miami Marlins in 106 games hit 192 with 12 home runs and 49 RBIs. This is a guy that in the past, in 2010, had a career year hitting 280, 20 home runs, 66 RBIs. If he can get anywhere near that production, then he's overachieving. Other than that season, though, he's hit under 250 for pretty much every season in his career.
Last year was a really disappointing season for John Buck because when you look at this is a guy who in the past has been a really average type of hitter. You know, he's going to get you home runs from time to time. Last year he hit 12, a small decrease from the season prior in 2011 where he hit 16. And when he was traded over to the Toronto Blue Jays, I really saw a great fit there. But when he went over to the New York Mets, it's also he's going to get more playing time because when you look at the situation over in Toronto, you got Aaron Sevilla, you got Jeff Mathis, who's no longer with the team, but at the time when he was, I always thought, John Buck, it's going to be kind of minimal playing time for him because, the team is really hyped up on Aaron Sevilla. But he's going to be coming over to the Mets. He's going to be carrying a big workload. And you know what? He is a good commander when it comes to, calling the game behind the plate. And it's always good to have a guy like that.
And then the backup catcher is going to be Anthony Recker, at least to begin the year. Down the stretch of the season, especially if the Mets were to compete, which I don't know if anyone expects that, but if the Mets were to compete, then we could see Travis Denard available later on in this season. I'm not sure exactly when. A lot of it depends on his minor league progression. But last year in AAA, in 52 games, he hit .265, 9 home runs, and 29 RBIs. That is record. He did not play at the MLB level last year, I don't believe, yes, he actually played with Chicago and Oakland for like a combined 20 games. So there's not a ton to go off of Major League-wise. He played at pretty much every level in the minors last year. So he's going to be the backup. We're going to see how that goes because there's not really a ton of MLB experience out of him. A guy that the Mets really need to step up and prove what he is Ike Davis in 2013. Ike Davis last year, yes, he hit 32 home runs and 90 RBIs, but in 156 games, he hit .227, coming off a year prior to that where he had hit .302. I think that you would rather see Ike Davis hit 25 or 26 home runs and bat .280 or .290 than see him hit .227 with 32 home runs. He's going to produce, but I think he's striking out a little bit too much. I think they want to see that average back up this season.
From his time from the day number 1 with Buffalo, the AAA Buffalo Bison, which is now, the AAA Las Vegas 67s or whatever, what their minor league camp is now. But, Ike Davis, since day one, with AAA, this guy, I looked at his game skill, he's always been considered as an average type of hitter. But when he came up in 2010 with the Mets and he played the 147 games, played phenomenal. 19 home runs, 71 RBIs, batted .264, and then in 2011 really stepped his game up. And you know what? The home run totals went down, but the average went up. But when you're looking at the standpoint right here, he really needs to bring his average up a whole lot more this year. And you know what? I can really see Ike Davis going out there because you want to have a first baseman that can produce well. And you know what? The power is good on him, but you also need to have a solid type of average. So what you want to have out of Ike Davis this year is a guy who can go in there, can produce runs. So Ike Davis, he has got to go into spring training this year, and we've seen a little bit of it during the spring training currently because his average right now is actually where it needs to be over there, but he needs to really bring that over to the regular season.
Yeah, he does need to do that, and I think that Ike Davis will improve, but they're in a lineup that doesn't have a ton of power in it, so they need him to still, yes, hit for the power, but also get on base a little bit more than he did last year. Lucas Duda is an option to back him up. Duda last year in 121 games hit just under .240 with 15 home runs. Duda's a piece that, ultimately Lucas Duda is going to start in left field, but Lucas Duda could be a guy that you look to shift over to first base if Ike Davis needs a day off. Justin Turner's also another option. We'll get to him in a second. But I think overall, Ike Davis is going to play pretty much every game this season, barring any huge injuries or huge slumps. Daniel Murphy's going to get to start at second. Murphy's a guy who's very versatile, can play a lot of different positions. Last year, in 156 games, hit .291, 6 home runs, 65 RBIs, stole 10 bases, I should say. And then the year prior to that, in 2011, while it was only in 109 games, it's a pretty big chunk of the season. He hit .320. This is a guy who has come up and given the Mets very good average hitting since he came up a few years ago, and I like what they have in Daniel Murphy.
Daniel Murphy is a guy who has all-star caliber. Batting-wise also, this guy really brings it up to the plate. Every single time he's on there, it's always a treat to watch him because you know what? A guy who from his day one with the St. Louis Cardinals. I think, what was it, not St. Louis Cardinals, with their minor league pharmacist. I'm looking up on his
Yeah,
website.
no, it was the St. Louis Cardinals.
Yeah, and Daniel Murphy overall has played phenomenal for this team. This is a guy who can not wow you with a lot of home run power, but he's going to give you a solid average year in and year out. A season prior, 320. In 2011, 320. 2012, 291. And you know what? You're going to get great production out of him, and on top of that, you're getting great defensive baseball out of him.
So, backing him up is Justin Turner. Justin Turner's going to get a look at both second, short, and first, and third. So, really, all over the infield, Justin Turner's going to be valuable. He's going to be the main utility man for the New York Mets as far as the infield is concerned. In 2012, Turner hit .269 with 2 home runs and 19 RBIs. That was over the course of 94 games, only 171 at-bats. A better sample size was in 2011 in 435 at-bats when he hit .260 with 4 home runs and 51 RBIs, stole 7 bases. I think he can be a little bit more valuable on the base path than he was last year. He really does not have a ton of pop coming off the bench, but his versatility in the infield, that's key to this Mets team. I think that's the biggest thing that he brings to the table. At shortstop, Ruben Tejeda will be your starter, taking over last year for Jose Reyes. Had a pretty solid first season, hitting .289 with 25 RBIs, only 1 home run. He's never going to be a real big power guy, but he stole 4 bases. He has a very good glove at short. I like Ruben Tejeda a lot. He's very young, and he's a piece that I'm not sure that the Mets originally anticipated he could be their long-term shortstop, but I think he's someone who's climbed the ranks of the minors, come up and shown that he has the potential to be a long-term fix at shortstop and not just a year or two holdover after Jose Reyes.
Now, this is going to be his 3rd year going into the New York Mets and at the Major League level. He's filling in a big role here, Tim. Over at shortstop, it was Jose Reyes, like you mentioned here. But you know what? What you're going to be getting out of Ruben Tejeda or Ruben Tejada, and he's a great overall fielder. That's what you really like to see out of him. But you know what? He also brings it up to the plate. Batted .289 last year, and you hope that he can possibly reach a .300 average this year. Because, this guy is not going to hit you a lot of home runs. He's not a guy who's going to get a lot of RBIs throughout his career, but he's an infielder that has great speed. He's not a guy who's going to go out there and steal a lot of bases, but when he runs down, up to first base and when he tries to attempt, this guy has great speed. So if you guys saw his minor league film, it's very great that you see what you get out of him with the speed. So that's another great, trait to have for a good shortstop. So you know what? I think it's a great, work in progress of what they're going to be doing with him. Is he going to be a long-term third or a shortstop for the New York Mets? I don't think so. I still think that Justin Turner is still, up and coming. He's going to have the bench role to him. He's going to be a part on the bench. He has great fielding ability. I think Justin Turner has obviously more power than Tejada. So, you can still see some competition going down there somewhere down the line as possibly even this season progresses or somewhere down the line in the future.
At third base, David Wright is the face of the franchise. Got an $120 million extension in the offseason. I believe that was the amount. And when I looked at the deal, I did feel like the Mets overpaid for David Wright. But there was a part of it that just said, this is the right move because David Wright is the face of a franchise that has lost Jose Reyes. They traded R.A. Dickey. They needed to make this move, and that's coming off a year where David Wright bounced back to his old form, hit .306 with 21 home runs, 93 RBIs, stole 15 bases, displayed a very good glove at third base. Again, David Wright truly is, if not the best, he's one of the top 5 third baseman in the game. And this is the piece that when you look around a Mets lineup that doesn't feature many household names, this is the guy that everyone would want to have on their team.
Absolutely, he's going to be. I'm pretty sure he's going to be actually be a part of the World Baseball Classic. He's usually the captain for the team because he's always on the World Baseball Classic. I think it's the 3rd year of the Classic. But you know what? You're going to be getting out of David Wright this year. The only issue right now for me is David Wright going to play 100%? Is he going to be healthy 100%? And that's what's really holding him back because he's been lingering with injuries. But last year stepped up very, very huge last year. He hit, 21 home runs, 93 RBIs, and had a solid average of .306. One really productive season. So you just wish that he can play a full season of baseball. Last year he did. Let's just hope that it can be a continuous thing with David Wright. But I really, overall, I'm a big fan of David Wright, and I wish him the best this year.
Yeah, and David Wright was someone that had great power back when the Mets played at Shea, and once they moved to Citi Field, coupled with injuries, they had the injury problem with David Wright, and they had the fact that he just didn't seem to have that same type of power. Last year, he didn't get back up to the 30 home run power that we saw in like 2008, that area, but I think he did get back to the form that obviously made him worth the Mets making him their franchise guy, giving him that amount of money. So that's ultimately what they do. In left field, Lucas Duda is going to be your starter. Duda last year at 239 with 15 home runs, 57 RBIs. He did strike out 120 times, which I don't like about him, but I do like the pop that he brings to this team, and I think he's a serviceable outfielder.
Lucas Duda, what he really does bring to the plate, and what he also does in the outfield. Last year in 121 games, batted 239. I do expect that those, the totals of his, home runs can go up a little bit. I think he can hit more, because back when he was in the minor leagues, this guy hit 23 for the highest, and I think he can really reach that peak of the home runs. But you know what? His average really needs to go up. This is a guy in the past couple of years batted 260 in 2012 with AAA, and then he batted in 2011 292 in 100 games. I think this guy is still an up-and-coming player in the team, and you know what? I think it's going to be a good idea to, have him start in left field, because I know there's so many positions that he can play. He can play the infield, what I've been seeing down in his AAA levels, and also in the AA level. But you know what? It's really solid that they put him in left field, because when you look at his outfield, it really lacks depth, because he's also filling in the role for Jason Bay, who is now off the team, and he's going to be going into that everyday left field role. So he really needs to step up his game in 2013. And if this team's really going to be fully committed to Lucas Duda, he just needs to bring those totals up a little bit more.
Before I get on to anyone else in the outfield, I do want to mention that Marlon Byrd, who had some problems with PED suspensions and everything, it almost appeared like his career was over. Marlon Byrd has come back and had a very good spring training with the New York Mets this far. It's still early. There's still time for him to just kind of come back down to earth. But so far, so good for Marlon Byrd. He is another guy that we could look at as a candidate in this outfield. Now, backing up Duda in left field is going to be Jordany Valdespin. Valdespin last year in 94 games hit 241, 8 home runs, 26 RBIs, stole 10 bases. In the minor leagues, his base stealing numbers were ridiculous. He stole 37 in 2011, so he is a very valuable piece to this team off of the bench, and we saw that at the major league level last year. As a hitter, he has some pop, but he's not going to bring you a great average, and that's one of the things that the Mets do lack on this bench, is really a very good hitter off of the bench. They have pieces that can run, field, versatile, but they don't have anyone that is a very good hitter average-wise. They do have some pop, but they don't have a ton of average. So that's, I think, one of the Achilles heels on this New York Mets team. And one other guy I do want to mention that they brought back is Pedro Feliciano, who is a longtime lefty for this team. They brought him back as an option in the bullpen as well. We forgot to mention that one. Kirk Nieuwenhuis, Justin, he will be the starter in center field. Nieuwenhuis, young player, under 25 years old, hit 252 last year, 7 home runs, 28 RBIs, stole 4 bags. I think the jury's out on ultimately what this guy is going to be, but they had the position open in center field, and Kirk Nieuwenhuis gets the shot this year.
You know what? It's also a big shot in the dark right here for the team. I think that Marlon Byrd, who's been playing phenomenal during spring training, can really, surprise us and actually probably end up being named starting center fielder for this team, because when you look at it, Kirk Nieuwenhuis, in his minor league film, I keep on going back to minor league film, this guy had a lot of, a big future Major League Baseball. When he came up to the New York Mets, he played in 91 games in 2012, but that was also, a split season with AAA Buffalo. He really didn't surprise me a whole lot. It was his first half of a season with the Mets, and he's going to be, has a big weight on his shoulders if he really wants to be, the everyday starting center fielder for the New York Mets. He really has got to step up, as in Lucas Duda this year. But you know what? If this is not going to happen for Nieuwenhuis, you can also bring up, Colin Cowgill, like I mentioned, who plays great defensive baseball, can really produce hitting wise. We saw with the Oakland A's. If you guys are Oakland A's fan and happen to watch this video, Colin Cowgill's a good option over in center field for the Mets. You also got Marlon Byrd, who can also make an impact. So for right now, I think Kirk Neuenhuis is going to have a big weight on his shoulders for right now.
Yeah, there isn't any question he has that. But again, the Mets just don't have too many great options. Mike Baxter's going to be the starter in right field. 89 games last year for the Mets. Baxter hit .263 with 3 home runs, 17 RBIs, stole 5 bases. Again, it's just... Neuenhuis, again, he is having some left knee issues, so there's some questions about his start to the season. Mike Baxter's going to be the starter in right field, Justin. And before we get to the rotation, I think the general synopsis of this lineup is that there's not a ton of positives.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many there's so many, open positions that, Marlon Byrd, Colin Cowgill, it's just mainly this outfield that lacks a lot of depth in it because there's not a lot of power in this lineup. You're depending on Ike Davis, you're depending on David Wright as your main 2 power hitters. John Buck, he's a great defensive guy, does great play calling. But you know what? He's not going to hit you, 25 to 26 home runs a year. You're going to be depending on David Wright and Ike Davis. But it's just that focus in the outfield where this team really lacked this offseason. There are a couple of outfielders that really come to mind. They still have Grady Sizemore. He's injured, but they're still looking at him, is what was reporting currently still is that the Mets could be going after Sizemore. They missed out on Michael Bourne. That was a big miss right there. I think the Mets should have gone out there, put some money to the table for Michael Bourne, and bring in somebody that you can get, some help around. But you know what? This team does have some good minor league guys that they can work out. But you know what? What you're seeing is what you get right now. You got Duda, Neuenhuis, and Mike Baxter. But you also got Cowgill, and you also got Marlon Byrd, who's been playing this phenomenal spring training. Let's just hope that those 2 guys can outplay, probably Mike Baxter, could probably outplay Neuenhuis. I think Duda is going to be a solid, holder at left field. But center and right field are just very questioning me right now.
Yeah, they are. And I think that the bottom line with Michael Bourne was, while he would have been a nice piece, his price came way down. The bottom line was that the Mets aren't competing right now. Michael Bourne was not going to immediately make them competitive, and they would have had to forfeit a draft pick, so it just was not worth it to them. At the starting rotation, R.A. Dickey won the Cy Young for this team, really became one of the most likable guys in the entire MLB last year. And in the offseason, the Mets decided that they could not agree on a long-term deal with R.A. Dickey. They moved on from Dickey, and Johan Santana, who was the $24 million man still for this team, and that deal's not looking too hot as of late. He is back to being the ace for this team this year. 2 years ago, 3 years, really every year that he's been there, when he's been able to stay healthy, he's been extremely productive. Now, has he been at the level that he was at in Minnesota when he was winning Cy Youngs, winning 20 games, having 2.60 ERAs? No, he was not, but he still had the ability, even as far back as 2010, to throw 4 complete games, have a 2.98 ERA, but the health problems have just really killed him. In 2011, missed the season. 2012 then went 6-9 with a 4.85 ERA. Really struggled to get back into the groove of things, and I think that he will get back in a sense. But I would be surprised if his ERA this year is lower than 3.20 or 3.30. He's getting a little bit up there in age. This is one of the best pitchers of the last 10 years, but the bottom line with Johan Santana is it hasn't been a complete fail like Jason Bay was, but it's never really turned out to be that move that the Mets thought it was going to be when they brought Johan Santana in there prior to 2007, believing that they could win a World Series.
Yeah, Johan Santana, the biggest concern that you have for Johan right now is just, is he going to have the strength? Is he going to be healthy a full season? And you know what? He's going to be carrying a huge workload for him in the starting rotation because, he's going to be the ace of the squad again. And you know what? He has, like Tim, you really put that in really good there. He has been good, but you know what? He has not lived up to the expectations that they once were when he got him over here from the Minnesota Twins. We just hope that he does, and this team has got to pull through with the run support. I know this team does lack a productive power, I should say, not a productive batter. But you got David Wright, you got Ike Davis. The hitters really got to step up this year. If you're going to make Johan Santana great, you got to have the production in your outfield. You got to get the production hitting-wise, but this outfield's just really questioning right now. Let's just hope that those guys can really step up when Johan Santana is on the mound.
And if Johan Santana does go down, then you're looking at John Neese as your number 2 guy, who had probably, I think, the best full season of his MLB career last year, going 13-9 with a 3.40 ERA, close to 200 innings. There's some news about him that he's pitched with some knee soreness early on in spring training, so I'm not sure exactly how much how much to look into that, I think, with him, but I think the thing to look into it more is the seasons prior to that, he had a 4.20 and a 4.40 ERA, and I think that that's more realistic to expect him to have an ERA closer to 4. I think getting 3.40 out of him, it's not very likely this year.
Yeah, I mean, John Neese, when you're looking at John Neese here, he's a good pitcher. I mean, don't get me wrong, look at last year. I mean, that really puts a big dent on things. But John Neese overall, he has great velocity, he has great big capabilities of getting another pitch into his, arsenal. I just think when it comes to him, he needs to step up this year. And also, I have to go back to the hitting. This team has great starting pitchers. You got Santana, Neese, Markham. It's a solid 5-hole right here, but you know what? They just gotta depend on their hitting. It's a team sport here. You've got to really step up when it comes to the pitching.
All right, the final 3 guys in this starting rotation we're looking at are Sean Markham, Dylan G, and Matt Harvey. And these are guys that make you believe that the Mets, mixed with Snyder Guard, mixed with everything, they make you think that this is a solid rotation, and or a solid rotation for the future. And looking at Sean Markham first. They signed him to a 1-year deal. Markham has always had injury problems, but when he's been able to stay healthy, he's been a guy that you can get a 3.50 to 3.70 ERA. That type of production you'll take from Sean Markham at the number 3 spot. Then Dylan G is going to be your guy at the number 4 spot. Dylan G, a few years ago, caught a lot of Mets fans off guard at a 13-6 record, but he had a 4.43 ERA. It was never a great rookie season. And last year he was able to get that ERA down. While the record was only 6-7, he got the ERA down to 4.10. And I think that the Mets viewed that as a positive, viewed it that he developed last year, and they continue to look for that development this year. And then Matt Harvey came up late in the season last year, but he was impressive when he came up with a 3-5 record, but a 2.73 ERA. Had the ability to go deep into games, had 70 strikeouts, a 1.15 whip, was very impressive for this New York Mets team down the stretch last year, and I do believe he's someone that they look at long-term as being a fit in this rotation. And then 2 guys that we're going to highlight in the bullpen, and then Justin and I are going to get to our predictions as far as the New York Mets record for 2013. Bobby Parnell is going to be the setup man. Parnell's done a very nice job since coming to the Mets in 2008. Last year at a 2.49 ERA, had 65 holds. That was among the league leaders. Just had a tremendous overall, or 65 hits he allowed. That wasn't the amount of holds he had. But overall, he had a very good season, giving them close to 70 innings, which was among the league leaders for setup men, and he had a very good season. Frank Francisco as your closer, he did not have a very good season. While he saved 23 to 26, he had a 5.53 ERA, and the Mets seriously did look at some other options this offseason, whether it was Brian Wilson or someone else just internally maybe giving Parnell a chance. Frank Francisco comes into this year where Brian Wilson's still available. Maybe the Mets saw something they don't like out of Brian Wilson, but he's still available, and you have Bobby Parnell. The bottom line is that if Frank Francisco pitches the way he did last year, he will not finish this season as a closer, so he needs to pick up his pitching this year if he anticipates being the closer when this season draws to a close. So, Justin, New York Mets 2013 preview, there it is. What are you looking at record-wise?
When you're coming over to the New York Mets, when you're looking at their record, it's going to be hard. You're in such a hard division in the National League East. I still think when you come down to the bottom two, it has to be in the bottom two of the division. This team does not have the pieces to, contend against, the Nationals, contend against the Atlanta Braves, and for even that post, even contend against the Philadelphia Phillies. I have them in 4th place this year. I think they're way, at this point, I had them better than the Marlins. Even though the Marlins and the Mets are really going to be competing head to head, but you know what? Both of those teams do not have the bits and pieces to compete against, the Braves, the Phillies, and the Nationals. But you know what? I still think that the Mets are going to be able to beat out the Miami Marlins and go into fourth place. This outfield just lacks a lot of depth. The infield, you don't know what you're going to be getting out of, Turner, who's going to be the bench role for this year for the team. Tejada's a good up-and-coming prospect. Ike Davis, let's just hope that he can bring that average up and can maintain, 34 home runs a year. Well, that's what we all hope for over there in New York. And also David Wright, let's just hope that he can have another, healthy season. But you know what? Other than that, I do not think this team is really have the full team to compete against, the other teams in this division.
So there it is for the New York Mets as far as Justin's side of it. For me, I pretty much agree. The Marlins are going to be a horrific team, potentially the worst team in the MLB this year, definitely the worst team in the National League as far as I can see. So I don't think the Mets will finish in last place. I think Terry Collins has a hard style. He reminds me a lot of Doug Collins in the NBA. He's a hard style, but he gets players to overachieve. And I'm not sure he's the long-term guy, but I think he is the bridge to that next great manager for this team, whoever that may be. And I think that the Mets are a team that has some bright young pitching. They made out well in the R.A. Dickey trade, although some fans are upset that they moved on from Dickey. They made out well. But overall in the outfield, they don't have a ton to rely on. You don't know the health of Yohan Santana or David Wright. So I don't see really any improvement if they don't even decrease a game or two. I see between 73 and 75 wins for the New York Mets in 2013. That is our Mets preview. We will catch you guys next time.